All right, folks. So those breakout sessions, they were good? Yes? Yes, 5 people agree. The sessions were good? All right. And we're feeling good about where we're at in the process of creating and building, defining, and creating action for the ecosystem? Yes? Maybe? Peut-être? Huh? All right, that's good. Because now we have the distinct pleasure of having our final keynote for the session, for our conference. And, just before I get to that, I just want to thank you all for being here, for being present, for being powerful in terms of your mind and your thought and your energy and your motivations so that we could get to where we're at now. This is just the beginning of something great. And so I'm just so grateful that I've had the opportunity to work with you as you go through this process of getting this thing off the ground. And so at this time, we're going to welcome our keynote address from Chloë Cheyenne. Chloë is one of the inspirational women leaders of tech. And being the CEO of COMMUNITYx, she creates a new social network of social good. Stay true is one of her core values. She wants to create a non-toxic, real community for people to support each other in real-life situations, spreading human positivity and love in the community. And besides being a successful entrepreneur, she is dedicated to combating racism and injustice. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm, loud, and hearty welcome to Chloë as she comes to share with us this afternoon.
Hey everybody, I'm gonna sit here for my keynote if that's okay. I want to start off by just acknowledging everyone who put together this amazing event. I think they deserve a round of applause. So I was really excited to hear about this event and happy to be out here in Toronto from Los Angeles. So I'm Chloë. I'm the founder and CEO of COMMUNITYx, which is what we call the app for change, and I'm happy and honored to be delivering the keynote today. I'll be saying next slide throughout the presentation. Hopefully it's not too disruptive for everybody in the audience. Before we get started, I want to put in everyone's minds this thought that came to me this morning as I was getting ready to come out here to share it in. And it's, in a white man's land, they will call it black on black crime. But if we had our own home, it would just be crime. This just came to me out of nowhere this morning, and I felt like it would be an appropriate way to set the tone for what we're going to be talking about today. So if you could just keep this in mind as we go through the slides, I would appreciate it. Next slide, please. On a lighter note, I want to address the elephant in the room. It might be a weird way to start a presentation like this, but and you might be like, there is no elephant in the room, but there is. And next slide, please. It's me, because I'm not Canadian, and I'm here speaking at your federal Black Ecosystem Conference. So my apologies in advance, because I am definitely an American, and so that's unfortunate in this case. I, upon further reflection, realized there might be a few other oddities at play here. Next slide. I'm not talking about the fact that when I was in school myself, I was never the person to get up in front of the class and speak. That was just so out of the realm of possibility for me to do as a student. Next slide, please. I would call out of school sick on days where I had to get up, where there were presentations I just wouldn't attend, because I never considered myself to be a masochist. That's just not who I am. So, but I'm not talking about those things. I'm actually talking about, thank you for the slide transition. I'm talking about the fact that I am racially ambiguous, and so it might be hard to understand who I am or where I come from just by looking at me. So I wanted to share with you a bit on my background. The woman at the top left of the screen is my dad's mom. She's a black woman from New Orleans. The black side of my family is Creole. The man next to her is my dad's father. He is from Oxford, England, blonde hair, blue-eyed white man. And so my dad is biracial. He's half black and half white. On the other side of the screen, that's my mother's parents. They're both immigrants from the Philippines. And after my mom was born in the Philippines, they actually left to America when she was only 1 year old and left her there. My mom didn't see her parents again until she was 6 years old, and they came to bring her to America. She had no idea who they were. My mom and dad met in college and had me. So that's a bit on my background and who I am. Next slide, please. So yes, multiple elephants in the room. Wanted to just address that so that we could move on and focus on the conversation for today. So now that we've kind of understand what makes us different, I want to spend the rest of the time focusing on common ground and focusing on what are the things that we have in common, what are the things that bring us together. So next slide, please. I'm a big Tupac fan, and it was just Tupac's birthday. So this is one of my favorite quotes from a song of his. It's, "Cops give a damn about a Negro, pull a trigger, he's a hero." And I chose this quote because I love the song and because this relates directly to an experience that my family had with my dad nearly being shot to death by Chicago police on the south side of Chicago. So next slide. This is my dad and I, and this is an interesting picture because it's us in our family car headed to the townhome on the south side of Chicago where my dad was nearly killed. Us headed back there for the first time since he was nearly killed, which was 30 years from the time of this picture. So he never went back there, and this was us taking a ride there together to share that moment. Before I go into the full story of what happened to my dad, yes, these slide transitions are perfect. Thank you. We can go to the next one. My journey. I went to Howard University School of Business. I was there on a full scholarship. This is one of our awards banquets, and it was a great time. I worked across the public and private sectors while I was at Howard. I was at the Haitian Embassy doing disaster relief coordination and direct response. I worked for ConocoPhillips in the energy corridor. And then finally, I got an internship to work with Google. And next slide, please. I took a full-time offer with this little-known search engine when I graduated from Howard, and I moved from Washington, D.C. to Mountain View to work at their headquarters. So that was my first job out of college. Next slide, please. And it was while I was working at Google that Mike Brown Jr. was murdered in Ferguson. And what happened that day was everyone came into the office and everyone treated it just like it was any other day. And that was just something that I couldn't bring myself to do. And so I started a conversation with the Black Googlers Network on the day that we all found out that Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson. And I asked them, why is no one talking about this? Why aren't we doing anything? We're working at one of the world's richest, most powerful, most well-resourced companies. Why is there such silence? And I got a flood of messages from people across the company basically expressing to me that when they had tried to speak up, when they had tried to speak out in the past, that they were reprimanded for doing so by the company. And after hearing that, I said, okay, and I built an internal movement within Google that found its way up to Larry and Sergey Brin, who are the founders of Google. And I presented to them, this happened over the course of like 8 months. Finally, I got a face-to-face opportunity with them, and I told them exactly what I thought about their company and exactly what I thought about the culture that they had built and how they treat their Black employees and how they didn't deserve our work and they didn't deserve our talent. And of course, shortly after that, I ended up leaving the company. I resigned. Next slide, please. But the reason why I was so passionate about that is because of what happened to my dad and the way it happened to my dad. In 1989, my dad was living on the south side of Chicago in a townhome with his mom and my mom, who was his girlfriend at the time. He was a college student on basketball scholarship, getting ready to work a night shift, heard a loud banging on the door, went to go see what it was, and by the time he got to the front door, cops had barricaded their way in and opened fire on my dad immediately, hitting him on the top of his head and multiple times in his groin area. And as my dad was bleeding to death in the hallway of his mom's home, they realized that they had the wrong address and that it was a case of mistaken identity. And in an effort to cover up the mistake they realized they made, they planted drugs in my dad's bedroom. They physically assaulted him after shooting him, and they didn't call an ambulance in hopes that my dad would just die. So by the time he actually made it to the hospital, he was in such critical condition that doctors told my family he wouldn't make it through the night. They ended up operating on him anyways. He had 12 surgeries over 72 hours, and doctors saved his life. But in between the surgeries, he was actually handcuffed to his hospital bed, even though he could barely move, because doctors were cooperating with the police officers, and the police officers told them that he was a threat. So by the time my dad was actually able to leave the hospital, he not only had to start what has become a lifetime of physical recovery, where he's had to learn how to walk again, regain all of his motor skills, eat on his own, but he was also fighting for his innocence in court against the city of Chicago, as you can see here, until I was 12 years old. My mom and I used to drive my dad from rehab to trial, from rehab to trial. And my dad was facing 20 to 25 years in prison for something that he didn't do and something that nearly killed him. So going back to this photo of him and I, that's fine. This was a really special moment for us because he never went back to that house again, but when I told him that I was leaving my job at Google and I was going to do something bigger and I was going to do something better, he said, well, if you're doing all this because of what happened to me, then let's go back to where it all started and let me tell you about it myself. And so we did that. Next slide, please. So I left Google. Next slide, please. And I went to work for this woman right here. Her name is Laureen Jobs. She's the widow of Steve Jobs. After Steve passed away, his estate went to Laureen, and she started an organization called Emerson Collective, leveraging her wealth to try and make an impact in the world. And so I was fortunate enough to work for her. I learned so much from her, and this is my dad and I at one of our big events that we hosted in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I was, 39 and a half weeks pregnant in this photo. Next slide. After I left Emerson, I decided that I was ready to finally start my own company. And this is kind of where that quote that I shared yesterday comes in. Don't just buy black, build black. In fact, build radically black. And when I say build radically black, what I mean is at every single juncture possible within your venture, build with our community in mind, hire with our community in mind, create a culture that supports our community, seek partnership opportunities that support our community, work with vendors that support our community, build radically black. Next slide, please. And so I went on to create my company. This is a photo of a sketch. It's a sketch of the first version of our logo. One of my sisters did it. I was kind of just spitballing, and I was like, this is how I kind of envision it. I like the color orange. It means togetherness. It means unity. And she drew up this sketch for me, and I was like, hey, I kind of like that. And so I've saved it over the years, but this is how it started. Next slide, please. But went to build on COMMUNITYx, which is the world's first majority Black-owned and led social network for social change. Next slide, please. Not shortly after founding the company, like doing all of the incorporation documents and stuff, was my daughter born. And so that kind of put a bump in the road. I wasn't able to focus on the company as much as I would have liked. This is a photo of her just being born. It's my dad holding her. And I just love this photo because this is a moment that that Chicago, that the CPD, that white institutions, that white supremacy nearly stole from my family. This is a moment that doctors told my family, even after he survived, might not ever happen. Because my dad wasn't supposed to be able to have any more kids after that. So I love this photo. Next slide, please. I like to be really transparent and honest about how hard it is to fully dedicate yourself to starting a venture. For me, it was extremely difficult. Leaving a full-time salary at Google, leaving all of the benefits that I had, and I'm not talking about like the massages and the free food and like the oysters and stuff, like just like health benefits, like dental, all of these things I no longer had. And I was raising my daughter for the first 2 years of her life on state insurance, on state medical insurance. We didn't even have dental. We had EBT is what we call it in the US. I don't know what it is here, but I would go to the grocery store and the government was buying my groceries. That's how I fed my daughter for the first 2 years of her life. And I just like to be really honest about this because there's really nothing to be ashamed of. It's a really hard path, and you just have to do what you have to do to survive and to make it, especially when you have that like will and vision within you. Then there's nothing to be embarrassed about because you know what the future holds in store for you and for the people that you love. So this is one of the first whiteboarding sessions that I did, just thinking about what COMMUNITYx would be and what we were trying to build. And this idea of people wanting to connect, people wanting to better connect and do things that matter, and then from there create communities and actually create real impact within the world. So next slide, please. From there, I just started to build. This is a photo of the 2 whiteboards that I used to raise the first $161,000 that I raised for my company. And I did it just through, it's a family and friends round. So I did it through just talking to friends who would refer me to other people, family members, and I raised $161,000 in family and friends money just doing it that way. And it was like the weirdest thing to me because I never would have thought that that money even existed in my circle. I never would have thought that was even possible because of where I come from. But through references and through people talking to other people, I was able to do it. And every single person that's on that top board is a Black person. So we raised 100% of that money from within our own community. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is just, ideating, building the company. Next slide, please. Doing interviews, getting the word out there. Next slide, please. Meeting with other people who cared about impact, telling them about what we were doing. It was literally like Will Smith in Pursuit of Happiness. Like, you guys know how you're just like telling anyone and everyone about. I was like, DJ Khaled, I have this idea. He was like, okay. Going to events with my team. Next slide. And then things started to pick up. I was able to do a live TV interview on MSNBC with Joy Reid and tell her and her audience about what we were doing. Next slide, please. She ultimately became an investor of mine. Meet civil rights leaders like Dr. Harry Edwards, who coordinated this Olympics protest that you see on the left or the right. Next slide. Attend the Time 100 Summit. Next slide. Meet different leaders in the space and tell them about what we were doing. Next slide. And then we had the opportunity to do Forbes 30 Under 30. So I took my team out to Detroit where the event was that year, and we competed against 500 other startups across North America to be named the Forbes 30 Under 30 top startup of that year. We kind of just went in wanting to share with everybody what we were working on and spread our message. We had no intention of didn't even think that we could actually win. But next slide. At the end of the exhibition, the Forbes team sent out this email. And they said, hello, exhibitors, this was like at midnight. Apologies for the late email. I'm pleased to announce that after thoughtful evaluation by our VCs, these are the following startups to participate in the Under 30 startup competition. Please be ready tomorrow at noon to take the main stage. And so we did, like in front of an audience of 3,000 people. Including Serena Williams, Kevin Durant, Rich Paul, pretty much everybody. We got up there and we just told everyone what we were doing and why we believe we can actually make a difference in the world, and we won. So we were presented the check, and we won for Forbes 30 Under 30 that year. And from there, next slide, that's fine. From there, we were pretty much unstoppable as a team because that top 5, we were the only team of color, the only Black team that made it to the top 5, and there were only like 10 of us overall in the 500. So knowing that we were able to go in there and beat out all of those other companies, nothing could stop us at that point. I really like this poem by Burton Braley. He says, if neither cold poverty, famished and gaunt, nor sickness nor pain of body or brain can turn you away from the thing you want, if dogged and grim you besiege it and beset it, you will get it. And that describes the essence of not only entrepreneurship, but being a Black entrepreneur, especially in this white-dominated world and ecosystem. This is the feeling. Next slide. And so after that, we raised enough money to be able to build the first version of our technology. It's COMMUNITYx, the app for change. The way it works is we use traditional social media algorithmic thinking to understand who a user is, where they are, and what specific causes they care about. And from there, we connect that user with other people in their local community and around the world who care about those same causes so that they can join in these digitally native cause-based communities and take action together around the things that they care about. So just imagine if everyone was on one platform and something happened tomorrow around women's rights that we all needed to mobilize around. If everyone was already there, then we could just open up the app and be like, hey, this is the petition we need to sign, this is the event we need to attend, and there are already 10,000, 20,000 people there ready and waiting to take action. That's the idea behind this technology. Next slide, please. We connect like-minded change makers around causes and calls to action. It's the simplest way. The best part about it is that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't own our data. Going back to what I shared yesterday, talking about liberation and integration, which was heavy in Malcolm X's thoughts and in his writing, someone who I truly respect and look up to. After we launched the app, we were finally able to go into communities and use our technology to do the work and to help people. And it wasn't until I was really able to do that that I realized how true this statement is, liberation over integration. And I'll explain why. Next slide, please. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through this one, but one of my partners is attorney Ben Crump. I don't know if the audience is familiar with him, but he's like the Attorney General of the Black community in the United States. One of the most prominent civil rights attorneys that the world really has ever seen. Through our work with him, we support a lot of his cases. And he represented George Floyd's family, Breonna Taylor's family. This is a case that we worked on with Attorney Crump that involved a 14-year-old Chilean girl named Valentina Peralta. Valentina moved from Chile with her family to Los Angeles, California, and 2 days before Christmas, Valentina was shopping in a department store with her mother, who's in this photo, and police bombarded the department store in search of someone who they said was dangerous because he had a bike lock, not a gun, but a bike lock. And they came into the department store with AR-15s. And before clearing out the store, shot in a direction that they thought was the direction of this person of interest to them, and ended up shooting and killing this 14-year-old girl. She was in a dressing room with her mom, hiding from the police. And one of the bullets that they shot went through that dressing room door and killed her. And she died in the arms of her mom. After the police killed her, they went into the dressing room and they pulled her mom away from her body and made her stand 5 feet away from her and told her that they couldn't touch her again because it was now a crime scene. So Valentina's mom had to sit there for almost an hour and just watch her daughter lay there. She couldn't hold her, she couldn't touch her. Because if she tried to, the police said that they were going to arrest her, or they might have done something worse. This is a picture from her funeral. We've worked on so many cases. We've done petitions, we've done rallies, we've done, everything for so many different cases, and they're all horrible. But going to this young girl's funeral and sitting there watching her mom and dad have to lay her to rest was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. And I realized that everything that we have to fight for as Black people, as Indigenous people, is because of the effects of what this centuries-long fight for integration has caused. We're trying to integrate into a society, into institutions that have been created by white men who are only interested in building and doing what's best for them. The only thing that's possible in this type of environment is incremental progress. That's all we'll ever get with integration. That's why I believe in liberation over integration. Next slide, please. This is the site to demand justice for Valentina. This is another case we worked on involving the poisoning of water in an indigenous community in Hawaii. A Navy-owned fuel bunker was leaking oil, and it was spreading to the main aquifer for this community. And so young children, pregnant mothers were all getting sick because of the poisoned water. And so we did a campaign to help them raise awareness around what was happening, and finally got the attention of the media and then got the attention of the White House in the US, and were able to submit a presidential briefing to President Biden. And we met with him and talked about what was happening, and he instructed the Department of Defense to defuel and decommission the bunker. So our petition worked, and our technology worked, and our marching and our mobilizing worked, but again, it goes back to liberation over integration. Because again, in this case, even though it's a totally different issue, this is not police brutality, this is climate injustice, we still had to go back to the government to ask them to stop doing something that was poisoning and killing our community. This is the site to take action on Red Hill crisis. Next slide, please. The last case that I wanted to bring attention to is one that we're working on right now involving Edric Brown, who is in prison for life and did not injure or kill anyone, but was excessively sentenced by a judge in the US, in California, who didn't like him and felt like 10 years wouldn't be enough, 20 years wouldn't be enough, 30 years wouldn't be enough. At the age of 17, they sentenced this man to life in prison. And so right now we're working to ask Governor Newsom, who's the governor of California, for a pardon for Edric Brown. Next slide. This is the slide to demand justice for Edric. Your petition signature will make a difference. But again, liberation and integration. Every case I've worked on is the result of failed integration. Everything that I've ever seen in our community is the result of failed integration. It's the result of us trying to fit into a system that was never built to support us. Next slide, please. This is another call to action that we've just started with the Dream Legacy Foundation, who invited me here. It's called EndRacistHate.com. This is, I believe, we are asking the government of Canada to officially make hate crimes against Black people unlawful. This is just a general site that you can go to take action on any of the causes that we have up on the site. Next slide, please. And this is one of the closing thoughts that I wanted to leave everyone with. True freedom for Black and Indigenous people will be found when we have our own land and our own economy. And I just want to, before I leave, clarify what I mean by this. What I mean is that everyone else in the world has their own homeland. Everyone, the Italians have a homeland. Everyone, the Australians have a homeland. True freedom is when we have our own land to build our own governments, build our own institutions, build our own financial systems, build our own businesses, our own schools, because at that point, we are no longer asking the government to please pass this law. Please consider this bill. Please stop killing us in this way. Please stop letting these guns overtake our streets. We will have freedom at that point because we will be able to decide what our communities look like and how we build and how the future looks like for our own people. So, next slide. Okay. Well, that's it. Thank you, guys.
Wait, just before you run away, I just wanted to say thank you for coming all the way from the West Coast to come and share this amazing and powerful message for us to consider and to take away, and to consider as we build an infrastructure and an ecosystem here in this country. Number one, how we can do it in a way that respects some of the principles that you're talking about, while at the same time looking for us to connect and to link with folks like yourselves in other places too, so that we can continue to build a liberation mindset on a global level. So thank you for that. Thank you. All right, one more time for Chloe, everyone. And with those powerful words that we just were able to experience, this is how we come to the end of our Federal Black Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Conference, the first conference. Note I say first, I don't say only. And so that then becomes incumbent upon us to have the second and the third and the 10th and the 15th and the 55th version of this conference, growing its numbers, growing its influence, growing its impact, and growing the community at large from coast to coast to coast in this country. So again, thank you all for the opportunity for me to be your MC for this event. It's been a great privilege and pleasure for me to do so. And thank you all for that. And I want to send a shout out once again to the folks who are joining us online. We know that you've been staring at a computer screen for an extended period of time. All of us understand the whole Zoom situation, and we applaud you for being here with us from wherever you happen to be. So thank you for joining us online and for being part of this process in that way. So thank you for that. Please applaud those who joined us by video. And with that said, I'm now going to call upon Ryan Knight to make some final comments for the conference. So everyone, show Ryan some love.
Always good. Thank you. And one more quick round of applause. He didn't perform a poem today. Oh, actually he did. So please give it up for Greg Frankson, really turning everything into a narrative. I love it. As we close out, I know on our desks or on our tables we have these manila envelopes. I would like everyone to open theirs, please. And for those that peeked already, it's all good. So in these envelopes, we have the Black Empowerment Manifesto. And why is this so important? Because what Chloë was talking about, having our own space to build from scratch what we want our ecosystems, what we want our governments, what we want our education system to look like is really important. What Eldon Holder Sr. was talking about, where we can now carve out our own space and not have to always rely upon the government, but we have to do it collectively. We have to have principles for ourselves that we are designing what we want to exist in this world purposefully. So the manifesto, which was written by an elder, Errol Gibbs, and we commissioned it through him because we, right as it is today, do not have a blueprint for the Black community. I'll say that one more time. We, as it is today, do not have a blueprint for the Black community. Everything that we've seen to support the Black community is done sporadically. Everything that comes out of the government is done sporadically. Everything that, hey, as much as our hearts are in it, as much as we are wanting to make a difference in the community, we see a problem, we start an organization, we run the organization, we help a few people, it's all done sporadically. We need to be purposeful for the next 50 years. And this manifesto is a look at the previous 50 years to say, what have we been doing every time there's a triggering event? You heard about, George Floyd. You heard about Breonna Taylor. You heard about the current, I think it was Hendrick, like issues that we're going through day in, day out, all these triggering events. If you look at history, triggering events in the Black community has been happening since the 60s, of course before the 60s, but let's just look at the last 50 years. 70s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s, triggering events are happening. So we had to dig in to see what were the responses to these events. And why is it 50 years later, we are in the exact same spot? A triggering event happens, the headlines in the newspaper say anti-Black racism is happening, we must create anti-Black racism secretariats, we must create diversity and inclusion programs, we must react to this triggering event. And then a few years pass by and it all fizzles away. What this manifesto does is it takes ownership of what is going to be happening for our community for the next 50 years. Because 50 years from now, we're going to arrive. And if we arrive 50 years from now and are in the exact same spot, I will not be able to look my daughter in the face and say that I did not contribute to creating a foundation that she can be proud of. I will not be able to look at my son in the face and understand I didn't build any infrastructure for them to build from. This is what we're dealing with today. We can look around us and see we do not have a Black financial institution. We do not have a Black education system, school board or ministry. We do not have a Black hospital. We do not have a Black police force. We do not have a Black CAS system. Anything that's first response, we are relying outside of our community to deal with our children, to deal with our conflicts, and to deal with our money. That, to me, is unacceptable. And the fact that you're in this room, I know that you agree with me. So coming out of this conference, it's really to say, what commitments can we make to each other? Yes, it's great to hear people speak. It's great to get motivated. It's great to even have breakout room discussions. But we must commit today, and because you're in the room, I'm talking to you. I guess there's people watching online too, but really presence is important to me. And that's why I'm probably gonna get emotional, and I apologize, but when you show up, I know there's so many more or other things that you could be doing. Everybody's busy. Everybody has a full agenda, but you took the time to say, you know what, I'm gonna be here, I'm going to be present. I'm going to actually stay the whole day. I know we've kept you a long time. But it's so important to me because the work that we do with this ecosystem is a priority. The money we got, any of the programs that we're running, that is not the priority. The priority is our collaboration. The priority is us creating these networks and creating these relationships because, as we talked about in our Wednesday session, our culture is relational. It's emotional. You can't just send a mass email to everybody and expect them to trust you. You have to pick up the phone and call them. You have to sit down and have lunch with them. We have to build relationships with each other, and that takes patience. And that's one thing that we typically don't give each other is time. We don't give each other the space to fail sometimes and to learn from it. We all know a Jamaican that done us wrong, and now you're done off all Jamaicans. Give us space to learn from our economic development. Thank you. Yes. Because in business, you're not always going to get it right. You're going to have people that might not have your best interest at heart. So when we're really talking about building economic power and developing economic strength and empowering each other to develop generational wealth, it's going to take time. And this is the time that we must afford ourselves, and we'll only afford it to ourselves if we trust each other. And we're only going to trust each other if we actually take time to connect with each other, to be at these conferences, to continue the conversation beyond these conferences. So what I'm asking for you to commit to today is continuing the work. We are going to be putting together study groups. We're going to be putting together some form of cooperative. We're going to be putting together steering committees that touch on each of these themes in the Black community, whether it's education, justice, health, social, political, media, and of course, economic development. But now I'm voluntolding you. You are part of this. It is not Ryan up here going to create all these steering committees and run it. No, it's us as a collective being part, having our voices heard in the design of what we want these things to look like. Not us coming to you and presenting what we've created that we think is best for the Black community. Those days are done. The days of government dictating us to how we should build our economies, how we should teach our children, how we should police our communities, we have to shift that narrative to now control our own destiny. And I believe the Manifesto is a great place to start, and we need to add in everybody's voices to fine-tune it and make it something that's actionable, so that 50 years from now, we land in a space where our children are possibly putting our picture on the wall saying, you know, Grandpa and Grandma did good for us. They created something that we can now, it's an asset to our community. We're not just leaving debt to our next generation. So again, my heart is totally full. It's full because you're here. It's full because with the looks in your eyes, I believe that you agreed to what I voluntold you to commit to. But beyond this, we're going to be sending out information on how to be part of these steering committees, how to be part of actioning a lot of what's in the manifesto, because the next phase beyond the writing of the manifesto is the think tank. Who is creating the strategies for the Black community? We have to purposefully be part of this discussion. And so anyone in this room that is interested in being part of these steering committees, being part of the think tank, or being part of the study groups, you're gonna get the invitation. And I'm making mental notes of everyone that is in this room. So I'm expecting to see you at Bible study, not Bible study, but study group. So thank you again. It truly is a blessing to see everyone in this room, getting the feedback of the connections you've been able to make and that the conference was of value to you. That is really what we wanted to deliver. And I want to thank the entire team, ranging from Charmaine to Derek and Chris Beth in the back, to my co-executive director, Nicola Harris. Thank you to our partners, Sheridan and Edge Discovery Zone, Entrepreneurship Discovery and Growth Engine. Thank you to the Pelon School of Business. And thank you to everyone that helped to put this together, especially the steering committee. So it wasn't just ACBN trying to think of what would a conference look like. this ecosystem came together to really design it from scratch. What did we want to deliver for you today and over the last 3 days and into the future? So again, a full hearty thank you. Have a great rest of the day and the weekend, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.